Now, to give us a look at what volunteerism looks like in the flesh, in a real VWO, I'm going to invite Mr. James Lim, who's a volunteer manager at Care Corner Singapore. He's going to share with us more about Care Corner's experience in engaging volunteers and the benefits that it can bring to your VWO. So let's hear it for James. James, please.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is James. I'm being called a volunteer guy in my organization. Anything to do with volunteers is me. Yeah. So thank you for having me here today. And this is actually really one of my pet topics. I really like talking about volunteer partnerships and volunteer engagement. And really, just a little bit about me before I continue. I began actually as a social worker. And you can actually pretty much describe me as an accidental volunteer program manager. That means I stumbled upon volunteer program management. I've never looked back, and in the last 10 years that I'm actually working with volunteers, I've learned to love the role and even appreciate the value that it actually brings to the different VWOs and the charities that they are in. So that's really what I hope to do, and what I really hope to do today is I'm not standing here to tell you what to do, but actually hope to actually provide you with a little bit of perspective about where does the whole volunteer program actually fit within the organization. And I hope that you'll bring back with you certain perspectives that will help you at the end of the day level up the work that you are doing, the good work that you are doing. So before I begin, maybe I'd just like you to remember this picture down here. The reason I chose this picture because I find that it actually encapsulates the whole presentation. It's a good summary to actually what I'm talking about. I'll revisit this picture again. Now, if I were to ask you this question, what is the number one challenge that your organization is faced with? I believe different one of you will actually tell me, manpower resources, financial resources, or even, where do I actually get the donors, right? So, and I think all this can actually be summarized into just one word, that is resource. And true enough, one of the things that I want to talk about here is actually manpower resource. We all know that there's actually a manpower crunch, and this is really felt. Not only within the social service sector, but also within the private sector as well. Just a few days ago, I was actually looking at the newspapers, and there's this article talking about the tight labor market within the private sector. And it's interesting that when you actually see that what they're actually looking to do is that they're even looking into that, and this is the private sector, they're looking into actually tapping into volunteerism. And in this, they actually have a program where they actually would like to look for HR volunteer directors who will be able to help SMEs level up. So it's interesting that even in the private sector, they're actually doing that. Last year, there's actually a call to actually really rethink about the way that we are actually operating now. And really, it's not enough to really continue to use the same mental model and to really think about what are some of the areas that perhaps that we might not be tapping into, that we could actually start relooking into. So, if some of you have seen this article, Minister Tan Chuan Jin has also mentioned that just a few days ago, on 29th of July, that for MSF, one of the key priorities is actually promoting volunteerism, in addition to working with vulnerable groups and building strong families. I think all this just goes to show that the role that the volunteer program will play in the various VWOs and non-profit sector, the organizations, is actually will take on a different role. So really, the question here is not so much of whether do I have a volunteer program. I mean, if you do have a volunteer program, that's good. But it's more about the strategic engagement of volunteers. And that's what we're talking about, is the strategic recruitment, deployment, retention, and development of volunteers. And that's really the crux of the whole matter. It's really about moving into this intentionally and really having someone to look into it. I like this picture because it kind of sums up 10 years of my experience. As I really think about what volunteer program management is, I have actually seen that how the volunteer program actually is a natural gateway for various organizations like yourself to the community. And it's through this that you actually get access to skills, to time, to resources, to networks, to business competencies. I have people who have actually served as volunteers who went on and actually became ambassadors in their own companies, when they know that their companies are looking for charities to adopt. So they actually went back. So this is actually, you can see, is the potential of the volunteer program. And the numbers really speak for themselves. In a recent IG individual giving survey done by MVPC, it's shown that volunteers actually donate 4 times more than non-volunteers. In Care Corner itself, where I'm working currently, we work with more than 1,000 volunteers, and that translates to more than $2.3 million of service that is being provided by the volunteers. Where we actually even went to translate this further, it actually translates to about 40 to 50 headcounts. That's in a year, based on the work that they do. Besides this value of service that they bring, that is 2.3, in my previous engagement with volunteers were also directly involved in raising funds for the organization, and they raised for more than $250,000 a year. Interestingly, in one of the cases that I worked with 2 separate groups, in a span of 50 days, they have actually raised close to $100,000. Now, this may not be a large sum, but if you actually think about it, it actually can go on to offset the headcount cost, perhaps 1 to 2 headcounts. And that's really powerful. And in a survey, again, recently there was a survey done by MPAC that looks into the landscape of skill-based volunteering, it's also shown that 64% of MNCs are actually currently engaging their staff on skill-based volunteering. So I think the numbers actually goes to show the potential of the volunteer program in really resourcing what we do. The question now is then, how do I then position my volunteer program for success? So much so that it actually will tap into the multiplier effect of the volunteer program, and it helped me to level up the service that I provide. Now, I can actually go on, and there are really a lot of things that you can do in strategic volunteer program management. But one of the entry points, it's what the NCSS team is doing, and what we believe in as well, is in the area of job redesign. And that's really looking into elements of work that's being done by staff, which can actually be allocated to volunteers so that they can be actually engaged in mission-critical work. That means the staff can focus on mission-critical work. Now, what does this look like? In Care Corner, we actually want to ensure that our clients are supported. So one of the projects that we did is called Jubilee Befrienders. It's where we actually very carefully recruit and train volunteers to be befrienders to the clients. They're actually being trained, and they're given very intensive training in terms of things like how do you do active listening, how do you understand genograms, for example, how do you actually write reports, because they actually have to communicate what they have found out to the social workers, and other things like understanding poverty issues, understanding mental health issues, and all these things are actually, the volunteers are actually being trained in this, and they work alongside with the social workers to ensure that in between the times where the social workers meet the clients, they are continually being supported. In another project that we recently done in one of our centers, a youth center as well, we engaged 88 volunteers to do what we call community needs assessment, where we go out to the community to almost 2,000 units, household units, to try to understand the needs of the community. Now, traditionally, this was being done by staff, and you can imagine how much time that takes. They have to work, and then they have to, nighttime, they have to go out into the community, and so something just struck our mind and said, why don't we just try, why don't we actually find whether we can actually get volunteers to partner with us to do this? And the result is that we have actually got 88 volunteers who help us with that. Now, in the area of youth befrienders, this is actually one of the pilot projects that we are actually working with NCSS on in the job redesign, where we actually identified 3 roles where volunteers can actually come in to meaningfully provide their services as well. One is in the area of youth befriender in the drop-in center. Another one is in youth outreach, where the volunteers will actually go out with the staff into the community to befriend the youth. And the third area is in the area of interest groups, befrienders coming in through the interest groups. Now, even though that's the case, we are still actually in the process of recruitment, and we believe that a lot of things will come out from it, good outcome. Now, there are challenges, definitely, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. Some of the challenges will include, for example, recruitment. You may ask, where do I get these volunteers? Now, I find that in working with volunteers, the issue is not so much of where do you find, because they are out there. It's whether is the person who is doing volunteer resource management skillful enough to be able to go out to form partnerships and to find them. And sometimes, working with volunteers, we also realize that the volunteers themselves will become your ambassadors. They will help you recruit the volunteers. Another question is manpower. Now, I have to mention this because then you have to actually engage one person to actually look into volunteer program management. And this, I would say, is a necessary initial investment. As you have seen in the previous slide, the program basically pays itself off. And lastly is the mindset. And I think it's just like your human resources. Volunteers are your extended workforce. And therefore, just like your HR, if they are managed well, they're selected well, they'll deliver results. The second entry point I just want to cover very quickly is the toolkit that has been developed. And I did have a look at the toolkit, and I find that it's actually very useful in covering different topics that will be relevant to your organizations. How do you retain volunteers? How do you recruit volunteers? How do you do job redesign? So it's really carefully thought out, and sometimes I'll just think it would be so good that actually if I have got this with me, I didn't have to learn things the hard way in the last 10 years. Yeah. So, do have a look at the toolkit if you actually have not had a chance to. So really, to end off, remember this picture? Yeah. What I want to say is the resources are really out there. And just like this picture, this person has a lot of ladders, but actually all you need is one. It's a matter of how do you actually engage the resources that are really available. So it's really looking into really strategically working with the community so as to pursue the mission that your organization is actually looking to actually fulfill. So with that, I just thank you very much, and do continue to partner with one another, speak to NCSS and all that, so that together we can level up the volunteer program management standards. Thank you very much.